Hello everybody and welcome to Bright Weird. Interesting subject this one that hopefully will get you all thinking. Now it's going to sound absolutely bonkers on the face of it because this is a crazy story, but I'm just going to tell it like it is, and then afterwards we're going to sort of delve into the realms of science and see if we can figure out the magic behind this mystery. This is the mystery of the Shamir Worm.
In the old days, King David wanted to build a temple, but God said that David was not the right person to build the temple. Instead, God said that Solomon, his son, should build the temple, and he did. So why was David not the right king to build the temple? Well, it might well relate to some logistical issues revolving about the particularities of tooling. In the Bible, Exodus 20:25, God said, "And if thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it hewn from stone. For if thou lift up thy tool upon it, thou hast polluted it." Basically, God said that if you're going to build me a temple, don't build it out of cut stone. The idea here is that anything that can be used to cut stone can also be used to cut people. It can also be used to wage war, and these implements of war, being dirty, cannot be used to cut the stone of the holy temple because it would make it unclean. So how on earth do you cut stone for a huge, majestic temple without tooling? Well, it seems that Solomon had a trick or two up his sleeve, 72 to be precise. And this is where it gets weird, and we need to look into the stories of allegory to get to the raw understanding. So I mentioned Solomon had 72 tricks up his sleeve. Now here's a tale. It was said that King Solomon was fabulously wealthy and a wise king, and that his power came to him because he captured 72 jinn and imprisoned them in a brass vessel. Jinn, also known as genie or demons. Imagine not having one genie in a lamp with 3 wishes, but a whole brass vessel filled with 72 of them. Also consider that lamps have always been associated throughout the ages with knowledge. It is said that each of the 72 demons that Solomon commanded had a particular power, and by commanding those demons, Solomon owned those powers. The genie in the lamp, the 72 genie in the lamp. Was it a lamp, or was it something else that glowed like a lamp? And what was in the brass vessel, if not demons? What were the 72? I'm going to explain this later, but first, it gets a little bit weirder. Now, Solomon wanted to shape his temple without using cutting implements on the stone. So how do you shape stone without cutting implements? And this is where we come to the story of King Solomon and Ashmedai. The temple, while it was being built, was made of whole draft stones. Yet hammers and axes or any instrument wrought of iron was not to be heard in the temple while it was being built. Solomon inquired of his rabbis, "How should it be constructed?" They answered him, "There is a Shamir worm made from the Naxian stone that Moses brought for engraving the stones of the vest worn by the high priest. It has the ability to cut through any stone, but not lead. For lead it cannot penetrate." Solomon asked his rabbis, "Whence might it be had?" They replied, "Bring hither demons, both male and female, for they know of its whereabouts, and they shall tell you." Solomon summoned his 72, brought them, binding them together, and they said to him, "We do not know where it is located, but perhaps Ashmedai, the prince of the demons, knoweth." Solomon asked them, "Where is he?" And they said to him, "He is in a certain mountain, carving out a cistern and filling it up with water from which he drinks." Solomon sent his men to capture Ashmedai, the prince of the demons, and to do so they drained his water source and replaced it with wine. And when the prince of demons returned, he drank and got drunk and passed out, and Solomon's men clamped the demon in irons. When he came around, Solomon said to him, I ask not aught from thee, excepting one small thing, for I wish to build the temple and stand in need of the Naxian stone. He answered the king, and said that the Naxian was in possession of the hoopoe bird, known as the mountain carpenter, for that bird could cut stone using the Naxian stone, something it was sworn to take care of. Solomon's men searched for a nest of a hoopoe bird that had fledglings, and when they had found one, they covered the nest over with a plate of sheer glass, and when the bird came to her nest seeking to go inside, she could not do so. She then went off and returned with a shamir, hoping to use it to cut the glass plate. Suddenly, a shout rang out at her, and she, being startled, dropped the rare stone, and they took it up, and soon made their way back with their find. The bird, meanwhile, went off and hanged itself, not being able to keep her sworn oath, having lost the precious Naxian stone. As for the stone that was captured, it was said to be the size of a small piece of barley, and it had to be stored wrapped in cotton and placed in a lead vessel. Now, there's a lot more to this story, but it's not necessarily relevant to what I'm talking about today, so I'll let you pick up on that at a later date. So it seems that Solomon acquired the Naxian stone, a stone that can cut through stone. But what was the Shamir worm? I will offer an explanation for that later. Let's go back to the number 72. I mentioned earlier that Solomon had 72 demons at his disposal. Now, I have pondered on this very question for many years and have not really discounted anything. Of course, the truth may have been lost to allegory and Chinese whispers over the long ages of time. But 72 certainly is a number that keeps on popping up in a myriad of legends, notably the Earth's precession, 1 degree every 72 years. 72 major temples have been found in Angkor, the seat of the ancient Khmer Empire. In Islam, 72 is the number of sects or denominations that are doomed to hell, and the rungs of the ladder of Jacob, 72 in number, said to ascend mystically from earth to heaven. Here in relation to Solomon, I've often wondered if the 72 related to an understanding of 72 arms of science. Perhaps Solomon had a secret book with 72 pages, and on each page a particular law of science. For instance, it could have been page 4, geometry, page 12, psychology, page 17, electricity, page 44, nuclear physics, page 52, the theory of flight, in particular, magic carpets, and so on. 72 pages of science, 72 demons. I don't know, I'm making that up. I'm not attributing any number to any area of science. I'm simply trying to express that these demons, each with their powers, could have actually been an allegory for an area of science. And imagine how powerful a king would have been with such an understanding in those old times. So let's consider for a moment that what if Solomon, with his understanding, decided to build the temple without stone-cutting implements by delving into his book of Jinn? And what among all of the science could he have used to cut stone? What was the Naxian stone and what was the Shamir worm? Here's an answer. A laser, or the word laser, stands for light amplified by source of emitted radiation. If you pass a light through a chamber of mirrors and charge it with electrical energy, the light will be amplified and become stronger. A nuclear pumped laser does exactly the same thing but uses a radioisotope to charge the photons of light instead of an electrical charge. Is it such a stretch to imagine a crude nuclear pump laser in the days of old? Contrary to common belief, the priests in the mystery schools were very well educated in many sciences, and lenses were known to exist in the days of old. In addition, naturally occurring radioisotopes such as uranium were scarce, but certainly available if you went looking hard enough. The myth of how they captured the Shamir worm. Glass was placed over the eggs. This could well be in reference to a stone-cutting ritual where lenses were placed over the isotope to focus and amplify sunlight. And perhaps the Shamir worm was a device that contained many lenses and a radioactive isotope for the purpose of creating a nuclear-pumped laser, a crude nuclear-pumped laser that amplified sunlight. It is said that the worm was wrapped in cotton and stored inside a lead-lined box. Was this the Ark of the Covenant? The Ark of the Covenant being a storage box for radioactive material? If it was, it would be little wonder that the enemies died when the Ark marched before an army. Just leave the golden box near an enemy's camp and they'll come out and take that precious box back into their camp with them, and like curious cats, open the box and expose their entire encampment to irradiation. A dirty trick, a dirty bomb, with an explosion of curiosity. It is said that long after Solomon's death, King Nebuchadnezzar came into possession of the Shamir worm, but it had become impotent and no longer worked. Could this be because of the half-life decay of the radioactive source?
So, in conclusion, loads of questions, not many answers, unfortunately. So, did King Solomon know about advanced science? Was the Ark of the Covenant a storage box for carrying around radioactive materials? Was the Shamir worm some kind of device for amplifying energy and cutting stone? Or did King Solomon actually command real jinn or demons, which, being bound to him, amplified his courage, will and force? So what do you believe? What do I believe? Well, I think the world is a far stranger place than any of us could ever imagine. So I'm going to leave it up to your judgment to decide what's bright and what's weird. I'm Steve. Thanks for watching.